Oh my gosh. Buckle you down. So I'd be conversational. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. I think I've met most of you over the course of the couple days, and we've got a couple extra in the back. I'm Ben. Nice to meet you guys. I'm here as part of the branding tech service through Michigan Main Street. I'm going to jump in and talk about some things that have nothing to do with branding first, if that's okay. There were a couple things that stuck out as we were people were asking me questions and things about the community. So there's some concepts I always like to share with folks. One of the things that was talked about is you have some vacancies in first floor spaces. That's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you have owners that are waiting for the right tenant and that kind of stuff. But there's an interesting dynamic these days in matching up appropriate retail with traditional or historic scaled retail spaces on the first floor. And it doesn't always fit. It doesn't always work out. So one of the first things I just want to talk about is in America, the average square footage of a traditional retail bay is about 1,800 square feet. And if you go through and do the math, and just trust me on this, if you do the law of averages, it means that a business owner needs to have somewhere around $84,000 in inventory to fill an 1,800 square foot space. It's a lot, and nobody's going to get that kind of funding to buy inventory. So one of the things that we've started to talk about is the idea of integrating micro retail into your downtown. People are really good at picking up gaps in retail presence on the sidewalk, but they don't care how deep the store is. So you can have these kind of shallow bays as long as you have the street frontage. So one of the things that if you take this model, the typical space is going to generate about 1,900 square feet based off average retail rates. It shows you if you break this stuff up, it changes the economies of scale. It changes the revenue models that you can base off of. But what's really interesting is there are actually ways where you can capture certain spaces and you can reclaim them as retail and not change the revenue or possibly even increase revenue for the property owners. And in fact, one of the things that I would tell you to go think about is look at service businesses that exist in your downtown today, and then look at how they use the front side of their space and how efficiently it's used. Typically, if you have accounting firms or law offices or anything like that, insurance agencies, they have a waiting area that's probably never used, and then they have this poor receptionist that sits up there and kind of melts under this, and then they get hot. So what do? They put up blinds in the windows, so then you can't actually tell from the sidewalk if there's something in that space or not. So I always talk about how things look from the street and realize there's a big difference between, can you tell if a store is open or closed? The bigger question is, can you tell if a space is vacant or occupied? And you always want to make sure that your space looks occupied. So this is an example of this is an engineering firm in the community that I live in now. And if you've ever met engineers, and I know we might have at least one in the audience, Dave, engineers are funny about the way that they do things. This is an office, and then there are 3 offices over there. Apparently, all the engineers in this giant office were heat adverse. So no one wanted the offices with windows. So literally, this was a conference room, but then those were all vacant. So we worked with them and we showed them how they could very simply reclaim those front offices and turn them into micro retail and just kind of introduce 3 new businesses, and you create a retail density instead of a huge gap in experience. Same thing, this is some of the things that they're doing now. It went away from being an engineering firm and now is a music school, and they've turned these into performance classrooms, and they roll the doors up and you can hear the music as you walk by. So it's turned into a really cool contributor. Another great thing to have in a downtown, a roller skating rink, because the economies behind roller skating rinks are amazing. The profit margin, no, I'm just kidding. So literally when we were working there, we were like, I don't know. The property owner was like, I'm having to give this at like 42% market rate, and I'd really like to use it in a different way, but I don't want to kick the skating rink out. But the entire front third of this building was this weird lobby that nobody really used. So we showed them how they could go through and recapture that and use it in different ways. And what actually happened is, after seeing the renderings, the engineering firm from the first one decided they wanted to move all their operations into this business. So kind of interesting to see, and that's what they ended up doing. So kind of the evolution there. Another thing that is really being looked at a lot with the idea of micro retail is they're using different kinds of mechanisms. This is called a Mississippi cottage. Everybody's seen shipping container being used for retail now. This was a cool little project that came out of Pascagoula, Mississippi, where they took 22 of these Mississippi cottages and created a retail incubator village. But I say incubator, but there was this really interesting kind of mindset that was adopted. We always think that you start small and grow big. In downtowns, we need to accept the reality that some people, small is the perfect size. So we need to do away with the mindset that the only way you succeed is by growing larger. There are a lot of businesses out there that can really do very well in a small scale. So I just wanted to share some of those. Those are some examples of some of the opening of that kind of stuff. And then that led to the creation of these things called tiny shops. And these are actually designed to be micro retail that can drop into a parking space. So that's a 1 space, 2 space, and 3 space. And literally just this morning, I got off the phone with the planning director in New Bern, North Carolina, who was hit by the storm. And they are going to use CDBG disaster recovery funds to build these, to go in and create kind of temporary retail ties until they have the time to restore their buildings. So I just wanted to hit on all that because I thought that the vacancy stuff was something that I heard a little bit about. The second thing that I want to throw out, because I had a couple questions about beautification. I had some interesting experiences just kind of looking at the streetscape, the planters, the weeds, the way that life exists on the sidewalk and all that kind of stuff. Everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with the concept of facade grants, right? Have you all heard of what they call component grants? So it's super simple. Take the idea of a facade grant and break it down and just say, you know what? A lot of property owners or building owners might not be ready to go out and do a full-on facade renovation, or they might be scared of what the cost or what the unknown is. So a component grant simply focuses in on a singular component in 1 year. So let's say 2019 is the year of the awning. And every property owner can say, how's my awning? Do I need a new awning? Maybe I do. And then you use that grant money to leverage a single source contract to go through and do the awnings. You end up making your grant money go a lot farther. And then year 2, maybe you do signage. Year 3, maybe you do building lighting. So you just kind of incrementally go component by component. And then that demising wall grant, like we showed with the micro retail, that could be one of the eligible components. So then the evolution of that concept is to something that we call a vibrancy grant. And a vibrancy grant is a very small grant that goes to building owners and business owners for anything that adds color or life to the community. So it could be chairs, it could be cornhole, it could be giant Jenga, it could be flags, it could, anything like that. And these are just some examples of different things that kind of exist in there. Anything that adds life to the district. And for some reason, I watched the weirdest thing happen yesterday on your sidewalk. Like I literally watched someone walk down the street. They were walking on the sidewalk. They made this really weird effort to get into the barrier at Lula's, to walk through the barrier, to get through the barrier again to go into the restaurant. I still don't understand that, but you've got the foundational ingredients to have that vibrancy, but maybe you can use those grants to enhance some of that stuff. So, all in all, though, the community, you look great and you're definitely moving in the right direction. So there's some really, really good momentum going there. The next thing I always like to do is look at the things that exist throughout the community. This is a collection of some of the logos and the events and everything that go on. The goal here is not to try to force everything to look exactly alike, but it is to create a platform that allows brand expansion and connection amongst the people who are experiencing downtown. So right now, there's a lot of good quality work, but there's very little connection between it. So we want to do a little bit better job at threading that together. Now, the other thing, for those of you that came in a little bit later, I did a lot of stuff over the past 3 days without permission. So I want to go ahead and ask for forgiveness beforehand, but sometimes I just feel like it's better just to kind of see suggestions and throw stuff out. So don't take anything as a criticism of what you have. Take it more as, I just wanted to be able to show, I feel like you have a community where the leaders of the main kind of cultural entities in the downtown are working together really, really well. I wanted to show you what that would look like from a graphic standpoint of that same level of cooperation, okay? So from there, obviously the goal and the focus of this process is the Main Street organization. This is a logo that you guys have had since 2009, the creation of the program. I love a good connection to punctuation. And I should say that with an exclamation, right? So the problem with this logo is that it didn't lead for expansion, but the expansion is so obvious, like colons and semicolons, like we have, no, I'm just kidding. What you guys had, this is completely and totally fine. There's nothing, I'm not going to say that it's bad, but you've also outgrown it. You've created and cultivated a place that's more sophisticated than this. And that's fine. It's not a criticism. Sometimes you just have to have an identity that helps to move you forward. And I think it did just that. I think that it got the attention that it needed from the community. It got the awareness started, and now we're ready to evolve that. So from that, I also want to reiterate one of the concepts that I introduced on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about two different elements of the system. The Main Street identity is an organizational identity, but we also want to give you a downtown brand. That downtown brand is a tool that is going to be given for free to the business community. It's something that we hope that they make merchandise from. I don't know if you know anybody that makes like shirts and stuff, but that would be amazing. So,
yeah, I'm getting into that business.
Oh, good, because I've heard there's nobody good around. So, there you go. I love it. I love it.
Wait, I might want to run that for you.
So, you know, a lot of times a Main Street organization will go through, they'll create this logo, and then they'll try to force that organizational logo to be the promotion of the place. And I don't know whether you noticed or not, but Main Street isn't always, you're not always perfectly happy with every single business owner. And being able to give this destination brand that truly is a shared open source resource to the business community, it allows them to couple your marketing efforts with their own to build true brand equity for the district, while also being able to create a connection to the organizational brand, but enough difference that people understand that this is a group and this is the place. It's almost like colleges and universities that have academic logos and athletic logos. And a lot of times there's a very clear distinction between those two. Now, I say that, and the state of Michigan really screws that example up because, you know, whether you're a state fan or you're a University of Michigan fan, both of them have really started to blend that a little. But everybody else still does it the other way. So we start with colors. I knew that I wanted a multitude of colors, but I also knew that I didn't want the spectrum to be that large. I wanted something that felt very much like it was compatible, that there was a harmony to the color palette. I knew that you had already started with some blues and greens, so I figured that staying in that general area but expanding it out made sense. One of the other things that I really liked was so much of the identity from the community had been focused on literal elements, architectural elements, things like that. So in doing this, I was shocked to find out that there was a river that ran through downtown. Now, granted, I didn't know about the community, but it's one of those things where it's kind of like, oh, wait, there's a river here. That's really interesting. And it's not just a river that you drive over, there's a river that you can walk along and that you can pass over this bridge that really moves a lot when you walk on it, which that scared me. It scared me, but it scared the woman standing on the bridge even more when I got on the bridge. So, having that kind of natural based color palette, but it allowed you to have these colors that created a good kind of sense of vibrancy. Then from there with the typeface, I'm here to tell you a very, very important lesson. I know that the community is historic, but just because you're old doesn't mean you have to use papyrus. You are allowed to use nice, clean, contemporary typefaces. I landed on selecting a sans serif typeface because you have a really interesting dynamic in your name. You have 5 letters and 3 O's. Being able to find a really nice, attractive typeface with a perfectly circular O, it creates an energy in that word type that really allows the uniqueness of your name to shine. And that's something that you want to take advantage of. So I selected a sans serif typeface that had a multitude of weights. Again, not rocket science, but it's just kind of clean. But because of the kind of content neutral and sometimes perceived as sterile way of the primary, I also selected a hand type for the secondary so that we could kind of create that personal connection with the accent typeface. Make sense? All right. So we've got our colors, we've got our typeface, and then I just wanted to kind of show you, like with this word type in this typeface, I literally went in, I looked at all the letters, I made sure that everything was spaced perfectly, I made sure that the 2 S's created the exact same horizontal width as the 1 W. I said 5 letters, it's 6 letters, y'all all knew that. Because in my mind, I think 5 spaces, because it was that O, the center of the O is the center of the word type. And people don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, but it's really important. If you do a good job solidifying that word type, then you position it for consistent use. So, color, typeface, word type, and then I always like to talk a little bit about brand values. There were a lot of things that we heard. Justin hit on this idea of this kind of organic authenticity that you experience in the community. That's it's not artificial. We don't throw it in your face, but it's one of those things where it's almost like you stumble upon it and discover it for yourself, and that's what makes it so impactful. And I really felt like that energy was something that was one of those strong threads. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was just remarkable stories. And I think that sometimes we have allowed ourselves to become somewhat lazy in telling those stories. I think this is something that Robert knows in trying to tell all the different facets from going from the Comstock cabin to the castle to the Gould house. You have amazing backstories there. You have amazing connections that you're trying to make through the preservation of these buildings. So I wanted to make sure the community is so much more than just a silhouette of a castle. And a castle is a really, really hard image to not have it feel a certain way. And one of the biggest things that came out to me as a potential threat or a concern in your community is if you walked most people through the branding process here, I feel like they would probably land on, we need to make a decision whether we're the castle or we're the locomotive. And you're so much more than either of those singular elements, but those elements are part of the things that make you great, but they also symbolize the bigger things that actually make you great. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, couple things. First of all, I think that you have started to achieve a cool factor. That cool factor is an amazing dynamic because cool factors make people break their own rules. It makes them drive a little farther. It makes them spend a little more. It makes them put a little bit more effort in. It makes them take a little bit more risk. So the fact that you've got that foundation that's being laid of cool, that is a great thing. And I do not say that of many places. I have to be honest. Like, there are a lot of places that want to be cool, but you all truly have some really, really good ingredients there. I mean, I felt like I kept finding myself stumbling upon things that made me go, whoa. Whether we're talking about businesses, yeah, I mean, Aviator Jane, that place is really nice, and that boutique could exist in any community. And literally not being able to get into the tea shop because it was so busy with people, like those are the kind of things you want to be able to talk about. You also have momentum. You've got a track record. You've got the ability to prove that you're putting your money where your mouth is. You're able to accomplish your vision. One of the biggest, most recent, I think, is the Armory, which I think speaks very highly to the determination of this community. Not only do you have cool factor and momentum, but you still have the door of opportunity. You still have the pioneer spirit. You still have the opportunity for people to feel like they can enter in on the front end of the curve. So having those ingredients is a rare mixture, and you should be really excited about that because you're still getting people in where they're feeling like they're helping to steer it. The history is evident. I had a really great comment. It might have been Josh. It was like, we don't have to work that hard to prove to people that we're historic. It's evident when you come. You can see it. And one of the other things that I thought was amazing is the architectural diversity that you have in this community. You have all the perfect ingredients. You have a small community that acquired wealth, and these people were determined that their homes would symbolize their individuality. So you are a community where the bulk of your historic housing stock was probably built in a relatively small period of time, but the architectural diversity is through the roof because everybody wanted to make sure they look different from everybody else. So, I mean, you can find virtually any kind of architectural style here. And I think that's pretty amazing. You have people that are working together well. And I tell people all the time, I'm a community therapist. Like, that's the first thing that I do. I just got to have a really big sofa. And you've got newer players, you've got good relationships, you have, it's almost like a mindfulness where people now understand that they each have missions and targets and goals, but there's a cooperation here that I think you'd be hard pressed to find other places, and you should be proud of that. And then finally, that cultural richness. Again, it goes to the wealth that you acquired as a community and a value that you set on cultural assets. Visual arts, performing arts, just really, really great stuff. Okay? So from that leads me to write what I call a brand statement. This brand statement was a little bit more of a brain dump with you all. I did a slightly different format. A lot of times it's more of a longer narrative, and yours, to me, I wanted to make a series of more impactful points. So I want to read that for you. We are downtown Owosso. Visit this historic hometown on the Shiawassee River. We are the place where paths crossed and settlers tamed the frontier. We are where timber became furniture, where rail lines crossed, and our connectivity fueled our prosperity. We are the home to one of America's most popular authors who in his day outsold Mark Twain and left behind his castle as a monument to writing. We are the home to the inspiration for the Polar Express, and our reality fuels the magic of childhood innocence. We are the home to vibrant arts, a reanimated armory, a restored theater, and a riverside amphitheater. We are the birthplace of long-living and family-fueled industry and the launch pad for exciting new businesses. We have local roasted coffee, traditional served teas, popcorn that is still warm, vintage finds, designer threads, and delicious flavors. We are home to the perfect escape. Come discover a day away. Experience the amazing that happens here every day. Meet the people that add color to our lives. Discover this place we call home and become a friend in the process. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. Come explore downtown Owosso and feel the warmth of gathering together. So, again, I'm not an English major, and I also have dyslexia, so I always spell things wrong. So, former English teachers, give me a little break. But those are some of the things that I felt like that I heard that really connected in with the downtown district and kind of that energy and value. And that's what really led me into the inspiration for the overall graphic image. I wanted something that was clean, something that was contemporary, something that really played into those kind of 6 cultural pillars that we keep seeing as these elements that make up downtown. And it really just led me to something that looks kind of like this. And it's that opportunity for you to kind of introduce that this community that truly is connected. You're taking advantage of that unique name with that circular element. The brand system allows for that ease of expansion. You're able to have these different elements, different formats, so that it still works in one color, it works in reverse. But what that really does is those elements help us to tell the story of all these different things that bring people into our downtown. And now all of a sudden, an icon that might not have really had very much meaning before, and I think that's one of the big things that people, that they like literal images because literal images allow them to tell the story. What's that picture of a castle? Oh, well, let me tell you about the castle. But now what this does is you now have an icon that's versatile enough that it can come to represent all of your assets and be that springboard for storytelling of talking about all these amazing elements that you have. As I continued to look, I just kept finding really interesting stories. Has everybody seen this photo before? 1905-06, world's champions of indoor baseball. I have no clue what that is. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that sport looks like. But I think it's amazing that you have a community that was the world champions of indoor baseball, and now one of your largest tenants in your downtown is an indoor batting cage. That's an interesting connection from history to current. And then one of the other things that I thought was really cool was the logo that was on their uniform. Now, this was the team from the West Side. The West Side was kind of the name that predated West Town. But I wanted to take that same logo as kind of an inspiration for a sub-brand for West Town. So, simply going through, being able to take those elements, you still have something that's round, it's tying into that simple connection, but it gives West Town this opportunity to kind of tell that story and show that connection. Now we move into organization extension. This is where we look at the Main Street organization. One of the big things that I always like to do with our Main Streets is be able to hit back on that 4-point approach that Main Street uses. The 4-point approach still very much exists. It used to be considered a 4-committee implementation style, and that has gone away a little, which is probably good for most organizations, but we still very much focus on design, promotion, organization, and economic vitality as the 4 tenets of creating a sustainable economy. So with that, I created, again, a circular icon that fits in. It kind of replicates the interlocking street grid of your downtown. You have a community that truly has 100% intersection. If you asked anybody in town, where's the main intersection in town, they know exactly where that is. They can name exactly where it is and exactly what business is on each corner. So that's kind of a cool dynamic, but then you can see with the 4 colors of that icon, they tie into those kind of 4 elements that tie into the Main Street approach. But then what you start to do is you start to have the ability to expand. I'm not sure what's next, but it's probably going to be one of you all's organizational logos because I decided to redo everybody's without permission. So, farmers market. Okay, farmers market's got kind of a word type that they use in Facebook. I'm not sure that there's necessarily an adopted logo per se, but knowing that next year is the farmers market's 35th anniversary, felt like it was a good time where you could introduce this kind of new look and feel, and you can kind of decide maybe it is just for the year, or maybe it's the foundation for continued growth. And I want to show you some other things that tie into that here in just a couple minutes. So you got your farmers market, Castle City Museums. Now, Robert talked a little bit about kind of the brand approach that the organization has using the blueprints, which I think are great graphics. They don't always scale small. You know, when you get to a certain size, you've got some difficulty with that. So that simple, kind of appropriate image in a clean way, it gives you that opportunity to possibly introduce that and then possibly even have sub-logos for each of your actual destination points. They could use an architectural element from each building, or, you know, so I think that all that stuff, again, very, very good direction that you all are moving on. Wanted to keep it in the blues so that all the blueprint work would still very much exist. The amphitheater, newly created icon for them, playing off of the turret on the side of the amphitheater. No reason to change that at all, but then simply adopting the typeface can bring that into the system. Art Center, again, that's their kind of icon that they use with not a tremendous amount of thought or consistency on the typeface that I see. So, you know, again, being able to use that connectivity. Steam Railroading Institute, again, a subtle evolution of what they're already using so that we can bring some of the typefaces in. I think the next one is the theater and OCP. And, you know, again, with this, we talked a little bit on Tuesday about having something for the venue. And then, and I was a little caught because I think that you call it Lebowski Center, but then I think on the building it says Joseph H. Lebowski Theater. It says Joseph H. Lebowski Center. It says that on the building?
It does, and it has to stay there.
Okay. It doesn't matter. The good thing is you can change that to center. I thought that it said theater for some reason as I was taking photos. So, but either way, you know, you've got those 4 lions that connect into the awning, or 2 of them connect into the awning. Now, we talked a little bit about the players, and I do believe that a lot of people say OCP. I noticed that on the marquee, it uses OCP in some of your messaging. One of the biggest things that stuck out to me as being interesting about the venue was the seat colors and the variation of them. So you can see really the whole holder of the logo and the color palette was inspired directly from the seats. So that is the place in which the experience happens. It doesn't have to be that, but again, it just kind of shows you how you can maintain individual identities for these organizations and entities, but there can be a connective tissue between those. And then all of a sudden, you still have individuality, but it also looks like a community that's singing in concert. Now, where it really starts to get fun as well is the event extension, taking this same foundation and moving it into the events. The events that's when the organizations bring vibrancy. And in talking with Josh, there's this weird thing that happens here in Owosso where like nobody's really in charge. It's like that's not really true, but you know what I mean. Like there's no event that's purely one organization. Everybody really works together. So I wanted to take some of the ones that were main streets that maybe didn't already have logos. Chocolate Walk, you know, being able to go through and take those O's and turn them into truffles, that's easy, and then you can get any kind of imagery you want. Now, this whole thing's not a logo. The logo is the element at the bottom, and then you can have interchangeable graphics. Trick or treat, you know, being able to go through. People love to throw a pumpkin in places. The film at the fountain, bringing in that element at the fountain is so unbelievably cool, but then creating a look and feel for the marketing so that you've got a consistency in your posters, but then you've got this this logo. Now, most of the time, if you're going to do a film logo, you know it's either going to have the little film thing or it's going to have the reel, and that's going to be your logo. It's film at the fountain, and your fountain is amazingly unique. So that's why I decided to lean that direction. And again, I try to design these things to just kind of share ideas and concepts. You see at the top, it says presented by Owosso Main Street. So you can use multiple logos on top of each other and layer them in ways to convey your messaging. Now, with the farmers market, you've got some amazing events that go on with your Castle Market series, 6 of those, and then your Moonlight Market. So now by adopting that consistent word type for market, you now create a consistency throughout that. There's still kind of hanging out at the same time. You have the amphitheater concert series that I think happens simultaneously. So figuring out how that all kind of fits in is something that's still up there. But that campus that exists between the amphitheater, the armory, the middle school, the bridge, you know, all that stuff, it's really an amazing space. And then some additional elements. I was telling Josh I had some issues with all the fantastic Apple updates. So getting as much done as I tried to get done, I was having issues with Adobe. So I'll talk about a couple things that I didn't get to yet. But we talked a little bit about signs. There are 3 gateway signs that lean into downtown currently. The panels are all the same. The design on them, I think, is not all the same. Because there's one that has the train on it, and then there are a couple others that look like they were from the kind of Wild Western. And
That's about when they were done.
yeah. So, you know, being able to just design a nice, clean image that can replace that panel makes for a relatively low-cost update. Banners. I know there's been some discussion about street banners in the community. Here's the thing. Street banners are extremely important and strategic tools. The problem is most street banners are over-designed. You start with a blank white page, and then you try to design the banner to look appropriately energetic and busy off of a white page. And then when you introduce it into the public space, it ends up creating more clutter than it does clarity. So typically when I design logos, I'm doing single color on solid canvas backgrounds. I want to create a sense of momentum, but I also want to use color strategically. So if you did 4 different colors, the normal instinct in most people's mind is we're going to print these 4 different colors, and then we're going to rotate every banner. So every pole's going to have a different color. That's not what I want. I want to stand at a 100% intersection, and I want to look down, and I want each street to be solid color. So as I travel through your district, the banners are now teaching me that they're whole unexplored areas that I have not yet seen. And then you use your banners in conjunction with your pedestrian scale wayfinding signage to help people to truly experience all of your downtown district. Does that make sense?
It's like a train line in a way, like a blue line.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just kind of use it to kind of denote these districts. And then once you set the foundation in your downtown core, then you can use some of those same concepts in a much smaller scale, obviously, for Westtown, for Dutchtown. So then you're showing, simply by the introduction of banners, you're showing that we as a community see this having the same value as that, because you're treating the banners the same. So being able to use that, now a lot of times people ask me about, what about banners for events and that kind of stuff? All that you can get there with that kind of stuff, but again, I think that you need to be really, really strategic about how you use them and where you put them. I'm a big fan of putting banners up in public parking lots. A lot of times we don't think about putting them there. That's where a person transitions from being traffic into a pedestrian. And that's where, let's say that we have one parking lot that is really close to, there's that parking lot right at Castle Park. Well, if they're right at Castle Park, chances are they're probably going to end up seeing the cabin, and they're probably going to end up seeing the bridge, and they're probably going to end up seeing the castle. We should be putting banners in that parking lot talking about the Lebowski Theater. So you use those transition points to help educate people about other elements throughout the community. Products, I didn't do a whole lot here because I was having copy and paste issues with my logos, but you get it. The logo system is simple enough. You can absolutely see just a baseball cap with just the stylized O. Like, all that stuff becomes super simple. I've seen enough out of your businesses here to know you get merchandising. You've got to make sure that there are opportunities for visitors where we're pushing day trippers. We want people to take the community away with them. And we also want our citizens to have an opportunity to show their pride in their community outside of just the high school. And I was so thrilled to see, it's your shop, right? That's got all the, you've got the train shirts and the castle shirts and all that kind of stuff. So really cool to be able to see there's already merchandise that exists. But again, give it away. Give this stuff to the businesses. Please have them profit from it. There's this weird, like, whoa, we need to control it. Control it for what? What are they going to do to it? How are they going to break it? They're not. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. They're not going to break it. They might stretch it. They might make it look a little funny. They might turn it into an egg instead of a circle. We can get through that. You know what I mean? So make sure that you make those resources available. The more it's implemented, the more valuable it'll be. And then finally, I just wanted to integrate the simplicity of the look into some composition. I mean, one of the nice things about this is not rocket science. I'm literally suggesting that we use elements that are round so that we can create brand connection. That's not hard. You know, every business, every entity, every event can figure out something that they do that's round. So whether you're tying it into the theater and using a spotlight, whether you're tying it into hit and pitch, you know, and kind of telling that story, whether you're tying it into the farmer's market, whether you're tying it into a pizza parlor or burger place or whatever you got for food, or you're tying it into coffee. Like, it just creates a very, very simple platform for expansion, because the expansion is the thing that's going to fuel the adoption. And if you can show your business community that they can easily tie into it, then they're going to be excited about figuring out how to amplify that message. So that's what I was able to do today. So you don't have to clap. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your reactions. Do you feel like, is this moving in the right direction? Do the strategies that I'm recommending, do they seem to make sense? Do you understand like where I'm coming from? Is there anything that you feel like, you know what, you just really missed the mark? Like, I get what you're doing, but it just, I think you handled this the wrong way. It's completely okay to be critical, because what we want to do from here is we want to take your thoughts and feedback, meld them together with these recommendations, and then create a toolkit for the community.
I'd like to talk about the banners for a second.
Absolutely.
We've struggled with that forever.
Mm-hmm.
I like the cleanliness of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't quite understand the color down the street thing. Could you
Okay.
explain what you're, like, if I'm standing at Main Street Plaza,
Right.
and I've got the four corners there, is it a different color going each way? Or
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what? Okay.
Yeah, so what you end up doing is, let's say on the block where Foster Coffee is and the package store and Blossom, let's say that there are 8 banner opportunities there. All 8 of those are going to be the same color. What that does from the roadway is that creates a lower ceiling. It creates a visual repetition that lowers the space. And from a public space standpoint, it actually serves as a traffic calming measure. So that's one. Number 2, it creates a lower ceiling that also it keeps people from spending so much time looking at upper floors that maybe are vacant. It just kind of, it closes in your visual cone and makes the whole space tighter and more intimate. if you do different ones on every single one, you don't create that momentum. You don't create that visual connection. So I think one of the biggest concerns that we often hear is this battle between, do we do banners or are banners just clutter? So by using that consistency corridor by corridor, then you start to have a strategy that you're actually rolling out of why you're doing it. It's definitely more traffic side. It is if you can get in there, the traffic side. In the perfect world, then if you want to work with double banner systems, then you do your solid color, your traffic side, and then you go for more pedestrian oriented enters, and then they can be a little bit more design, having a little bit more meat to them, because the interaction with them is ground up instead of car. Great question. Yeah. Definitely. If I'm picking the priority on street side with solid color and double banner. The standard height is high enough that you can't jump it and grab the bottom rod. But beyond that, to be honest, all of your standardization is actually going to come from the poles that you have and the wind shear that they can handle. So your wind shear is going to determine your banner size, and then your banner size will determine the height that you mount it. The biggest thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to go and create a 24-inch by 36-inch banner and then put it 12 feet up, because then it's going to shrink so tiny that it wasn't even worth the effort. So typically we like to say we like the banners to be 8 off the ground, and then I like to see if I can get somewhere between a 48 and 60-inch height. Yes, ma'am.
With the banners, are one intersection and going one block each way, or would you have the same take if you stood in?
Great question. If I was prioritizing, absolutely. If I was prioritizing, what I would do is obviously we all know the 100% intersection, but then the next thing that happens is what's the street that you guys are on? Washington. So the Washington Water, is that right? What dead ends into the Armory? Exchange. So the Washington Exchange corridor becomes different as well. So I would want to continue your colors along Main and not change them. But you might end up rebooting you might reboot to take advantage of the Exchange Water corridor. So that because ultimately you want people to go, and I really feel like your community is best experienced with a really big L. So if I'm getting somebody to walk and they're hitting from JCPenney, they're going down, they're turning at the 5 and Dime, and they're walking down, they're seeing the Armory, they're sliding down, they're crossing the bridge, they're seeing the log cabin, they're seeing the castle, that's a great pedestrian loop. And then if I can get them back and hit them back up along Main to finish their loop, like that's kind of what I'm looking for. So what I might see if I can do is I might see if I can just take a quick aerial and do a color map and just show you what I would do. Here's the thing. You guys are smarter about how your downtown works than I will ever be. But just introducing that concept that, so we actually want the banners to create connectivity and drive somebody's experience. I think that you probably will get it, but I'll see if I can map it out and see if I can make it where it makes sense. Yes, sir.
So the colors that you picked when you first started with the palette, that was because we had in our original logo that blue and line.
That's where it started, and then
That's where it started.
yeah. And the other thing too is In looking at the photos that I took, looking at the streetscape, looking at the buildings, looking at the presence of brick, and that there's a lot of brick in the community, I felt like the blue to green palette would look very, very good popping out from the infrastructure of the streetscape and the buildings. So as I was picking the spectrum, I chose not to try to replicate some of the prevalent colors in the buildings, but instead finish out the spectrum.
Well, and this is not what I would want to go towards, but always been red. I mean, there's always been a lot of Kerwood in festival kind of emphasis, and it always used to be red was a color. Now, I personally don't like red, but I mean, I'm trying to imagine if this is rolled out, some of the criticisms that might have. Well, where's red? I thought Kerwood was always red. Something like that. Just I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand
He's
that,
just-
but
he's
I'm
just
just saying,
thinking ahead.
I understand it, but I'm just trying to.
No, absolutely. And I'll tell you exactly why I left red out of the primary palette, and I did it on purpose because red doesn't have spectrum. Like red turns into pink. And you know what I mean? Like it's like if you try to couple green with red, you're now trapped in Christmas. If you try to couple blue with red, you will always be patriotic. And not that patriotic's bad, but we're trying to create a palette that we can kind of own.
Okay.
And red's just problematic. I mean, I
Enough
like
said.
red,
I was
and
just
yeah.
trying to find out where you're
Now you will see though, like I mean, even with this, I'm bringing some reds and some oranges and some warmer colors in there. But from a primary standpoint, I landed that direction because I felt like that was the one that made the most sense and was easiest used. Yes, sir.
Great. I'm gonna make a statement, a warning, and then I'm gonna ask an engineer kind of question.
I love it.
I know this is an engineer.
I'm ready. Okay, I'm ready.
All right, here's the statement.
Okay.
The statement was, when I first saw that logo, what occurred to me is for the first time, we've integrated our things. And that, if I heard it right, that was your intention.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's the statement. Now, here's the engineer question.
Okay.
Do we have to explain that? By the way, our logo means we're identifying 6
You're
of our.
absolutely going to have to explain it.
Okay.
And that is the desired effect. It's not designed to be self-explanatory.
Okay.
The from a brand value standpoint, going back to what Justin said, one of the greatest things that happens is community is the conversations. The conversations that happen, the fact that everybody that I have met has been willing to literally stop what they were doing and sit down and talk about how much they like this place. And when you do something this simple, the most beautiful thing about it is we want people to tell that story. Now that means that as you roll it out, you will have to educate them. You will have to tell them the backstory. Some people think that that's the sign of bad design. Some people firmly believe that if you have to explain it, it's not good. I completely disagree with that as it relates to communities. Because to me, the same people that'll say it's not good design will also wholeheartedly agree that word of mouth is the best form of advertising. So when you build storytelling into your identity, then you are creating and cultivating that word of mouth advertising. That's the way I think of it. So that actually wasn't a very engineering question.
Well, I thought it was because, see, I would want to know why we have 6 there. I would start to explain it right away, and I thought, oh, only engineers.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
No, that opens up a lot of possibilities for me now that I feel more comfortable. It's not
Good, good.
because I can see a whole bunch of stories now going around that. Okay, so now I'm on a roll. So let me ask.
Go for it.
No, I'm not embarrassed. So you there's examples where turning everything in. So I'm thinking about Owosso Books and More. I mean that was our name. So do you really mean that we should work toward whatever it is that we're pitching, we really work to make it.
No, it's not that you. It's not necessarily that you work to make it O's. It's just What it's doing is it's creating an opportunity for uh, the businesses to go through and figure out ways that they can integrate themselves into it. So if you wanted to go out and you wanted to do an ad that just in big bold letters said books, and then you replaced one of the O in books with the icon, I don't see any problem with that. Now, it's not about forcing people to do that. And I think that there's enough latitude in the suggestions that it could be that you're going through and you're doing replacing the icon in the word book, or it could be that you're doing this really great image of a round coffee table with a hot bestseller sitting right on top of it. You know what I'm saying? So it's all about just finding different ways that you can integrate into the message and create some level of connection. But then also giving enough opportunity for the businesses to do it their way.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about, because we talked in the Tuesday meeting there. In other words, if we get the businesses thinking this way,
Absolutely.
businesses that have never ever, you might say, come together, businesses haven't come to the business owners meeting. No, I'm just looking for these
Absolutely.
concepts that-
I mean, could you imagine if you went through and you did a holiday gift guide, and in the holiday gift guide, every single business could submit some product or something that they felt like tapped into it? I mean, there are any number of things that you can do, and I think that's one of the big idea is that it's not a big idea. The big idea that it's so simple that you have removed the barriers of entry. Guys, got anything? Robert, John, Justin?
I'm thinking about implementation.
Okay.
Like getting buy-in. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, well, this is a great idea. I really like it. I like most of it. But then I'm thinking, how do we get someone like you to come and maybe buy-in from the rest of the community? Like, could you explain this? I mean, could you get up and, explain it like he does and get
Have enough
buy-in?
phone conversations with them.
Right, I mean, that's my only,
That's a
only
good
fear.
question.
I
That's a
can
good.
do it, I sell appliances.
Is the implementation.
So this
There you
is-
go.
Well,
Well,
I,
because
Just
he's got all the.
sales.
he's got
Heck,
all
you
the
can do a
expert-
front loader.
The only reason why
That's
I say
round.
that is because
We
he's
got
the
that.
expert, and he's got all the expertise, right?
Right,
And so this is the expert here, and how does someone else stand up like you sell appliances, right?
Right.
That's a great thing.
Right.
But who's going to stand up and be the expert for this and get buy-in? Because I think it's great. I mean, I think you listened really well, and you listened to all the conversations between. I watched you listening to everybody when you thought they weren't.
Right.
So, and a lot of that came out.
It's called
here.
eavesdropping, but
Yeah.
good at it.
I thought it was really great. I think the concept is fantastic.
Thank you.
I like
the
the
proof
I
is
like
in
the whole
slides,
entire
though.
thing.
That's gonna be the expertise.
But I'm moving on to implementation. Which one of us is going to stand up and be able to implement this as well as he does? That's my only
I
thought.
think part of it is like everything that happens in this town, because we are so interconnected with everybody.
Right.
Right.
As we start, those of us that see this and say, this is the thing, they're gonna,
Abs-
it'll spread around. town very
Absolutely.
quickly.
I think the big thing that you really focus in on,
Yeah,
you've got
it's good enough to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you've got good organizational relationships, which means there might be some synergy in rolling and implementing out through event marketing and that kind of stuff. And then you have enough interaction with the business community to have a couple early adopters, and then allow the early adopters to pique other business owners' interest. The last thing that you want to do, and this sounds a little, I don't know if it sounds wrong, but it's just like the last thing you want to do is have this toolkit open up a conversation about, oh, well, what do you think the design should be? No, it's just like it's created. We're going to do this. We're going to roll this out, and some of the early adopters take it and start using it, and then everybody else either decides, I want in. Oh, I can get it I can just use it. That's awesome. Or that didn't really fit what I'm working on, and then they're going to continue to kind of. I mean, businesses set themselves apart. There's some that are really proactive. There's some that are not. But we did a similar system in a community called Travelers Rest, South Carolina, and again, it was super simple. The whole campaign was just, it starts with TR. And we had all these words: trails, tradition, travel. You know, it was a weird community. It didn't have a ton going on, but it was a gateway to community to 7 different state parks. Really, really outdoorsy. And we had a guy in the audience who owned the local Ford dealership. And he was like, trucks start with TR, you know, and everybody thought that was hilarious. But I mean, all of a sudden, this guy who doesn't really ever do anything except for radio ads of somebody screaming and full page ads, you know, hawking used cars, now all of a sudden sees how he can tie into the system. And he was the first business to implement. And it was this kind of weird thing where everybody was like, whoa, nobody expected that to happen. So, I'm always here. I'm in Michigan a lot. So as you start to get your hands on the toolkit, if there's a way I can help, I'll always come back here. I mean, I'm serious. I don't say that to every community I work with. You guys have something special. You need to go to some of the other communities that I work with, and then you will see how truly special you got it. And so, you know, if I can help at all, just let me know. I mean, Josh knows how to get a hold of me, and we already talked a little bit about rollout and implementation. So just because I'm leaving tonight doesn't mean that I'm done with you all. We're always there to help. So if they're evolution, if they're new concepts, if there's question about rollout. Now, one of the things that I will be giving you to kind of hit on Robert's question, I have a comprehensive brand implementation checklist. It's not in order because there is no set order, but it is a comprehensive list of all the things that you probably need to think about as you're thinking about brand integration. There's also a page that I will customize that's called How to Be a Brand Partner. And it is intended for the other organizations and businesses in the community, and it simply gives them ideas of how they might integrate the brand into some of their messaging currently. So those 2 tools are really, really good at being able to speak out and talk about how they can take these and use them. So in addition to that, every logo that I showed, I'm going to give it to you. We're going to save every one as an individual file and save it in 5 different file formats. I create a comprehensive style guide, explains all the typefaces. I'll give you all the typefaces, all that kind of stuff, defines all the colors so you can have color consistency. I'll give you all the photos that I took. I've got about 110 photos that I took throughout the downtown. I'll give you all that stuff. And everything will be compiled into a digital package, and I'll be able to share a single link, and you can access all the resources.
Awesome.
Full copyright gets turned over to the Main Street organization because they're the client here. But the way that I kind of word that copyright transfer is more focused on the transfer of the Main Street brand, so that the community one is more shared by all.
How
Justin.
long is that posted for? And
Forever, because it's a
so we can
Dropbox
always
link.
access that link every
Absolutely.
certain amount of time that we have to gather that data.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a Dropbox link, so it'll be there forever. I literally have a comprehensive archive of 500 communities over the past 20 years. So they get there, they live online, and it is amazing how many times I get an email 5 years later from a new Main Street manager saying, I've come on, I found a hard copy of this report. I don't know where any of these files are. So yeah, that link will be good forever. And sometimes, depending on how proactive a community is, we'll actually go through and we'll create kind of a smaller subset in that the same folder structure that is intended purely for the business sharing. So we'll do a redundant style guide and then only do the destination oriented logos. And that's something that we can set up as well. And then that way you can literally keep that link, and they can share that with vendors. They can give it to anybody. So, yes, ma'am.
When will that be available?
Tomorrow. I feel like Steve Jobs. And we'll be shipping it tomorrow.
And then, only other question I have right now. Modifying.
None.
designs. Okay, cool.
Take it and do whatever you want. Make it yours. That's the whole intention of this service. We hope to be able to get you a toolkit that if it's 60% there on certain things, you know, all those organizational logos that I didn't ask permission for, take them and do whatever you want with them. If that means throw them away, it means throw them away. If it means take them and evolve them or change them or tweak them or whatever, you have complete and total freedom to modify in any way you see fit. It's yours.
I think that
Cool.
this is.
Awesome. Awesome.
You know, I was a little leery about the color palette at first, just
Yeah.
because those bright blues don't really pop to me. About how it would be positioned in the community.
Absolutely.
You know, that color palette doesn't have to be always
You're exactly
6
right.
colors or 8 colors.
Yep.
We can always expand on that. We can add 3 or 4 colors. Every street to be a different color.
Absolutely.
There's no reason we can't.
You can always lean on
Well,
Lebowski
flexible.
Theater. They got a great palette of seat colors, that's for sure. And you know, one of the biggest things, one of the reasons I knew that I wanted to have something that was kind of contemporary, I knew it wanted to have an element that had 6 components to it. The way that things are, you have to keep a spectrum relatively tight there. People don't, they don't always respond well as the spectrum expands too far. I've always told folks, it's like I don't use purple, because the moment you use purple, you use rainbow. And I got a 5-year-old daughter. I see plenty of rainbows, so but being able to get it in. But yeah, I mean, if you decide that the color palette's a little bit off, you'll have all the vector files. You can tweak that in any way you see fit. Absolutely. Great questions. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to go back to your, the little bit of hit we had on the parking lots and advertising things that aren't there versus are there.
Yes.
I apologize for coming in at the end. I was
Oh,
out
no,
of town,
no
so,
problem. No problem.
But one of the challenges I think we have, at least I have, because I'm on the outside edge of things, is we are a bigger community than most.
Right.
In terms of lots of blocks and lots of things to go to. So doing that, I think, is really interesting, because we really haven't talked about that is part of wayfinding, and we're trying to direct people from where they might start to other places versus the places where they drove and got to. I could be off base here, but one of the things that struck me when that came up is that O is a compass. And could you use that as part of wayfinding to go north, south, east, west, and direct?
Absolutely.
Is there anything that hits you when you think about that you think we could do to help people navigate?
Okay, so you kind of asked 2 questions simultaneously. So I'm going to see if I can answer them both. The first one's a simple one. If you want to adapt the icon to make it help teach people about the district, go for it. But the bigger question that I feel like you're really asking is, can you use colors to help deploy a districting strategy? And so that the districting strategy helps people to understand and experience more of your downtown. And that, we call it a districting strategy. I think a lot of times people automatically assume that you're creating these sub districts and then you're naming them and all that kind of stuff. And I know that's not really what you're saying, but as you look at it, you absolutely could explore whether or not it makes sense to deploy a color-based strategy to help people experience more of the community. If you do that, you might find that a district strategy contradicts the suggestion that I made. I made the suggestion that when you look down your major corridors, you see solid colors running down the corridor. I worked in a community, Mount Hope, West Virginia. They had a dramatically curvy main street, and they literally had a mountain that separated 2 parts of their downtown. So we decided to do solid color yellow down one side, solid color blue down the other. So when the main street took a hard 90-degree turn, when you were standing here, you saw, it helped you to understand that the street turned. It helped you to understand there was more around this mountain. You might find that with a districting strategy here, you have one color, one solid color running down one side of Main and then it continues on for a street or two, and then another solid color on the other side of Main, and it continues on. So instead of being solid colors down streets, you more have like quadrants, if that makes sense. But again, when I look at the map, I'll see if I can make that a little more clear. Any way you can use color to help people understand they haven't seen it all. And that with you're exactly right. Your downtown is large. There are different elements around there. I mean, I felt like I had driven all around town and I didn't realize that there was all the redevelopment in the mill and the casket factory and, you know, all that stuff out there. So using those colors to help people experience it all. Yeah. Any other questions?
I know the logo is.
Yes.
You could say it represents maybe cultural icon.
Absolutely. It can be elements of the community. I mean, there's so many different parts that make the community well-rounded that, you know, if instead of it being focused on those destinations, if instead it is focused on values and attributes, that's good too. They can have multiple meanings. They can have whatever storyline you want to put in there. Just knowing that the number wasn't arbitrary and that it was inspired by something was, I think that's the big one.
It was inspired by things.
Right.
That starts a great conversation.
Exactly.
And it has some other imagery to me, just spitballing, but it shows a sense of logo, the overlapping. It's almost like
Yeah.
holding in a way.
Absolutely.
That was
Absolutely.
one of the first things I thought.
Without the weird Microsoft clip art heads,
Right.
you know, gathered around in a circle. Yeah.
It's cool.
I'll find out when I start messing with the graphic, but is that O the same as the O above?
That O is not. So the O in the typeface is slightly off from being center, and the icon is perfectly round.
Okay.
Yeah, or not centered. It's the O in the typeface is slightly off from being perfectly round. So, Justin, were you going to say?
Can you go back to that slide where you had the 6?
Yes.
With it. So I think that this is a really sense for navigation as well. With each one representing something, and you know. That makes it clear for those of us that maybe aren't quite as analytical. Navigational tool as well.
Right.
So not only does this show that unity, but it also, I think, represents, you know,
And as I sit here and kind of think through it, there's part of the slide that's probably wrong. If you're really digging into it, it probably shouldn't have the OCP. It should probably have Lebowski Center. Lebowski Center is the venue, and this really is kind of more focused on the collection of venues than it is the organizations in those venues. So as I think through it more, but you get the point. I mean, I think that. Anything else you think I need to hear before we call it a night?
I think it's amazing.
I like it. I like it.
Awesome. Awesome.
I use the circle and Owosso in my ads.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
all the time.
I'm doing a washing machine ad just for you. Just so we're gonna use you as the
Because
example.
I'm in the paper all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
John made a shirt. You just did that for fun, right? The
Oh, yeah. Just playing with your logo?
With Owosso and our Foster logo is the O.
That's cool.
Every
Yeah.
time I wear it, people are like, "Where can I get one of those?"
Yeah,
they do.
absolutely.
I do like that shirt. I know which one you're talking about.
So I think that concept was
Well, I
right.
got 1,000 graphic ideas going through my
Right.
head.
Good.
Yeah.
Absolute. Good. Good. Yeah.
I think people are
Start
gonna
thinking
need
about
it.
John.
Good.
People are gonna love
So
it.
John,
Great.
I'm so comforted to know that I can explain all those 6 and, oh yeah, it's not just a random picture.
Makes it
I
feel-
want that shirt right now. I want
With
that to
that.
look exactly like that. with
That's
With
Lebowski.
Lebowski.
Me too.
Lebowski.
And I like how every color is in that logo all
Yeah.
the way around. Yeah, absolutely. I can see this as a logo right there.
Right.
And you could have 6 fun things. I mean, those are destinations.
Right.
But it could be eating, shopping.
Absolutely.
having
Well,
fun,
and then think about that. Like,
exercise.
if you
You know.
adopt that as a concept, if you adopt the inspiration, but then also expand what it represents.
Right.
What if this also tied directly into your transformational strategy and you started to create like a 6-part itinerary? This is the perfect day in Owosso.
Oh, wow.
And then it's like this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And it, like if you're stringing together 6 things, you're stringing together a day. And it's a good, legitimate, full day. And then that just reinforces your whole strategy of how do you go through. And it's funny, I had talked a lot, and then this morning Lee asked me if I was going to dig into how do you communicate differently if we're talking to the Lansing market than if we're talking to the Flint market, if we're talking to the Saginaw market. And to be completely honest, I felt like that was extremely important early on because I was playing off some of these things. Josh said something on Tuesday that I just loved, this idea that we could position ourselves as the up north that you can spend the day in. And I think that is a great message. I think it's something that's really kind of cool, but it connects to this, but isn't integral in this. There's really nothing about this that has to be directly changed. It just allows you that opportunity to realize that, let's say you take the 6 elements of a day in Owosso downtown, like, you might pick 6 things that are slightly different if it's the Flint market. If people are frequenting downtown Flint, then they have exposure to Foster Coffee in Flint. So Foster, they're not going to drive 30 minutes here just because, you know what, that's good coffee. I think I need to go to their flagship. That's not going to be their motivation. They're probably going to want some things that are a little different. So you might just package up your elements a little bit different based off the market that they're coming from.
Red hatters, you could do something specific.
Absolutely.
Demographic. For
We have the bowlers, the
Absolutely,
300
there's
bowlers.
so many different groups that come.
We have the
that
Palm
demographic.
bicycle riders.
I don't know whether y'all realize it, but red hats and bowling balls both are round. Something in there. Bicycle wheels, motorcycle wheels. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we do something on the street.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And then, if you go back to the beginning, there were some that I didn't edit on purpose. Open Streets is great. New Year's Eve is great. The vintage motorcycle days, I love the theme that's there. Like you would break that identity if you tried to force it into this system because it's different. It's different kind of art. It's a different kind of feel. And that's fine. Being able to maintain a little bit of that variation is important to preserve that authenticity. All right, y'all. Say 25. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.